My name's Olivia Parker, and when I was 22, I was this close to finally achieving the dream I'd been chasing my whole life. Years of perfect grades, sleepless nights, relentless focus, all of it had led to one massive opportunity, an interview for the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship. This wasn't just any scholarship. It meant studying abroad, learning global diplomacy firsthand, and launching my future on a world stage. I'd been preparing for weeks, refining every detail of my application, rehearsing my answers until they came out smoother than muscle memory. Everything was right on track. And then, 3 days before my flight, something happened that changed not only my plans, but everything I thought I understood about family loyalty and what it means to fight for a dream.
My passport was missing. It had always been in the same spot, locked in the desk drawer, safe, organized part of my carefully controlled world. But that morning when I reached for it, the drawer was empty. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. I tore my apartment apart, pockets, shelves, fridge, yes, fridge, every drawer, every inch. Nothing. And then, at dinner that night with my family, I saw my sister Madison's face across the table, a smug, knowing little smirk curling on her lips, and my stomach just dropped. If you're watching this, hit the like button, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from, and make sure you're subscribed, because what happened next is the reason I'm here telling this story. See, I grew up in Lakeville, Michigan. It's one of those places where most people live and die without ever crossing the county line. My parents, Robert and Nancy Parker, worked at the same manufacturing plant for most of their lives. Dad was a floor supervisor. Mom handled payroll. Neither of them had gone to college. At first, they seemed proud of me. Every time I brought home an honor roll certificate or aced a test, it went straight on the fridge. They bragged about me at church potlucks and family cookouts. But as I got older, that pride started to shift. It became complicated. I got obsessed with global issues after a 4th grade project on the United Nations. Most kids groaned about it. I basically moved into the school library. When I gave my presentation, my teacher pulled me aside and told me I should think about becoming a diplomat. That was the first time I realized maybe this wasn't just a school thing. Maybe this was my thing. Meanwhile, Madison, my sister, older by 2 years, was the golden girl at home. She had average grades, a rebellious streak a mile wide, and the kind of magnetic charm that made people overlook everything else, including my parents. She didn't just outshine me socially. She made sure I stayed in her shadow. And not by accident. When I was 9, she accidentally spilled juice all over my science fair project the night before judging. At 12, she deleted my entire history essay from the family computer. By high school, the Sabotage got more creative. She spread a rumor that I cheated on a test. I got called into the principal's office and investigated before I was finally cleared. During my SATs, she called the test center, claiming our grandmother was in the hospital. I was yanked out mid-exam. Guess who was home watching TV when we got back? Still, I kept going. I graduated valedictorian full ride to the University of Michigan. Political Science, International Relations. I was determined to get out not just of Lakeville, but out from under my family's small expectations. The Rhodes Scholarship. That was my way out. Full funding, Oxford University, global prestige, everything I'd worked for, and more than anything, distance. Space. A literal ocean between me and the people who kept pulling me backward. I gave everything to that application. Essays, professor recommendations, global policy research. When the email came saying I'd been selected for an interview, I screamed so loud that my neighbor knocked on my door to check if I was okay. The interview was in Oxford, across the Atlantic. Flights, hotels, expensive, stressful, high stakes. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I picked up extra shifts at the campus cafe, sold my textbooks, maxed out a credit card. I even bought my first ever professional suit, navy blue clean lines. I felt like a grown-up diplomat already. Everything was coming together, until the morning I reached for that passport, and found nothing. I sat there frozen. Then panic kicked in. I tore through my apartment like a crime scene investigator, every drawer, every folder, even under the couch. Nothing. And that's when it hit me. I'd used my passport just 2 weeks ago to verify my identity for the scholarship. I remember putting it right back in that drawer. I live alone. Only a few people had access. My best friend Taylor, my parents, and Madison. I called Taylor first. She hadn't been over in over a month. Then I called home. Mom answered. Casual as ever. Oh yeah, Madison stopped by your place last week. She borrowed your anthropology textbook. She's thinking of taking some community college classes. I blinked. Wait, she has my spare key. Of course, honey. She's your sister. We didn't think you'd mind. I asked to speak to Madison. Her voice came on all fake sweetness. Hey, little sis, what's up? I can't find my passport. Did you happen to see it when you were over? A pause. Why would I notice your passport, she said. I just grabbed the book and left. That practiced innocent tone, I knew it too well. Madison, if you took it, please. I need it. The interview is in 3 days. This is serious. Wow. Always so quick to blame me, she said with a dramatic sigh. Maybe you lost it. You've been super stressed about this whole fancy scholarship thing. Stress messes with your memory, you know. I ended the call, opened Instagram, scrolled through her recent posts. And there it was, a selfie, posted yesterday. Captioned, sometimes you need to delay someone else's journey to figure out your own. Sorry. Not sorry. Family first. In the photo, her smug face. And just barely in the corner of the table beside her, the blue edge of what looked a whole lot like a US passport. That was the moment I knew. She had stolen it. And I was going to have to decide fast how far I was willing to go to stop her from stealing my future. I didn't even think. I just grabbed my keys, jumped in my car, and headed straight to my parents' house, fury pumping through my veins. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every slow driver in front of me was a roadblock between me and the truth. Madison answered the door in pajama pants and a hoodie, like she didn't have a care in the world, like she hadn't just detonated my entire future. Didn't expect to see you today? She said, leaning on the doorframe with that same infuriating smirk. I want my passport, Madison, I said, pushing past her. I saw your Instagram post. Her expression flickered just for a second, then she rolled her eyes. You're being ridiculous. That post wasn't even about you. I didn't stop. I headed straight for her bedroom. Where is it? I demanded. That Rhodes interview means everything to me, and you're trying to ruin it because you can't stand the idea of me doing something you can't. She followed me, her voice rising. Jealous of what? Of you running off to England? Of you always needing to be the best at everything? I spun around to face her. This isn't about being better. It's about finally getting to follow my dreams. Something you've sabotaged since we were kids. Her arms crossed. It's always about you. Every dinner, every holiday. Olivia won an award. Olivia's professor says she's brilliant. Olivia might be going to Oxford. You have no idea what it's like living in your shadow. And there it was, the truth. Her resentment laid bare. I took a breath. So you did take it. Madison's eyes narrowed. Maybe I did. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something. Maybe you're meant to stay here. With your family. That half-confession hit like a punch to the gut. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Mom and Dad. They need to come home. She shrugged. Whatever. But I caught the flicker of anxiety in her eyes. Dad answered after 4 rings. His voice sounded tired, confused. Olivia, everything okay? No. Madison took my passport. I need you and Mom to come home right now. There was a pause. A long one. That's a serious accusation, he said carefully. I'm sure. He sighed. We're on our way. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 years. While we waited, Madison camped out on the couch, texting furiously like this was some minor inconvenience, not the deliberate destruction of someone's future. I searched her room again, drawers, books under the mattress. Nothing. When the front door finally opened, Mom rushed in, first concern written all over her face. Girls, what's going on? Your father had to leave work. Dad came in behind her, still in his boots, face set in that blank way he always wore when he didn't want to take sides. I didn't waste time. Madison took my passport. I need it back immediately. My flight to Oxford is in 3 days. Madison gasped like I just slapped her.
I didn't take anything. Olivia's just freaking out because she's unprepared and I'm an easy target. I pulled up her Instagram post and showed them the photo.
That's my passport, I said. Look at the corner of the table. Dad squinted. Could be a notebook or a journal.
And the caption, I said, delay someone else's journey. That's exactly what she's doing.
Mom sat beside Madison and put an arm around her.
Honey, she said gently, did you take it?
Madison's eyes filled with tears like magic.
No, Mom.
That post was about therapy. Dr. Phillips says I need to stop comparing myself to Olivia. The performance was Oscar-worthy. And just like that, Mom's expression softened.
See, Olivia, you're jumping to conclusions.
You've got to be kidding me, I snapped. She's sabotaged me her entire life. And you always make excuses. I turned to Dad. Please. The interview's in 3 days. If I don't get that passport, everything I've worked for disappears. Dad sat down slowly in his recliner. Maybe this is a sign. I stared at him. A sign. Maybe. You're pushing too hard. Going too far. International careers moving overseas. There's a lot of good work you could do here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not looking down on anyone, I said. This scholarship is one of the most prestigious in the world.
Mom jumped in using her best peacekeeper voice. We're proud of you, sweetie. But maybe it's time to think about staying connected to your roots. What about teaching at the community college? Professor Parker has a nice ring to it.
I laughed. I couldn't help it. They were trying to rewrite my dreams mid-crisis as if I hadn't spent years earning this opportunity.
This isn't about staying close to home, I said. This is about Madison stealing from me.
Again, Madison sniffled. Why does it always have to be about you? Maybe I needed help. Maybe I needed my sister. But you were too busy chasing some fantasy life.
You mean by studying hard and working multiple jobs? I said, my voice sharp.
Dad raised his hand like he was ending a courtroom session. If this Rhodes thing is meant to be, it'll work out without all this drama. Those words, they broke something inside me. They weren't just ignoring the sabotage. They were justifying it. They weren't just minimizing my dream. They were calling it excessive, elitist, unrealistic. I realized then this wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was the pattern. All my life Madison sabotaged. My parents looked the other way, and I was supposed to accept it. Not anymore. I left shaking with fury. Not just at Madison, but at all of them. The people who should have been fighting for me were fighting against me. Back at my apartment, I locked the door behind me, dropped to the floor, and cried until I couldn't breathe. I wasn't just in danger of missing a scholarship. I was in danger of losing everything I'd built because of the people who were supposed to be my safety net. And for the first time, I knew that I would have to win this fight alone. The tears finally stopped, but the ache stayed. A heavy, hollow pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe, much less think clearly. I sat in the dark back against the wall, every minute ticking by like a countdown to disaster. My Rhodes interview was in 72 hours, and I didn't have a passport. That night, I barely slept. My brain just wouldn't stop cycling through frantic ideas and immediately shooting them down. Could I get a replacement in time? Could I delay the interview? Could I somehow teleport to Oxford with sheer willpower and rage? By morning, I felt like a ghost of myself. I hadn't eaten. My eyes were swollen. But I forced myself to get up, make coffee, and face reality. First call the Rhodes Scholarship Committee. Maybe, just maybe, they'd let me reschedule. A soft-spoken administrative assistant answered. I explained my situation carefully, leaving out the family drama, and emphasized that it was an emergency. I asked if a video interview might be possible, or if there was any flexibility. She was kind, but firm. Miss Parker, I understand, but the interview dates are fixed. Committee members fly in from all over the world. We can't reschedule for individual applicants. If you can't attend, we'll have to withdraw your application. That was it. No room for debate. I thanked her and hung up, staring blankly at my phone screen as the weight of those words settled over me. Withdraw your application. The words echoed like a gavel slamming down on my future.
I scrambled to research emergency passports. Even the fastest services took 7 to 10 business days. I didn't have 7 days. I didn't even have 4. In desperation, I called Professor Winters, my academic advisor, one of the people who'd written me a glowing recommendation. He was sympathetic, but practical. "This is why we advise students to double-check travel documents well in advance," he said, disappointment heavy in his tone. I knew what he meant. He didn't know about Madison. He thought I was just careless, that I'd sabotaged myself. I hung up and called the International Studies Department. Same response, maybe try again next year. They sounded sorry, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. By evening, the sun had set and my room was pitch black, but I didn't move to turn on the lights. I just laid on my bed staring at the ceiling, feeling completely and utterly defeated. And then, right around midnight, my phone lit up. It was Taylor. Her name on the screen made me cry again. But this time, it wasn't out of hopelessness. It was because part of me still hoped she'd believe in me, even when I couldn't. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "Liv?" "I just got your texts," she said, her voice sharp with fury. What the actual hell? I told her everything. The missing passport. Madison's Instagram post. My parents' reaction. The scholarship committee's refusal to reschedule. All of it poured out in one long, exhausted monologue. Her silence stretched a little too long. "Then your sister is a monster," Taylor said. "And no offense, but your parents, also terrible." I let out a broken laugh. "It doesn't matter. I can't get a passport in time. It's over." "Bullshit," Taylor snapped. "This is not how your story ends." What am I supposed to do? I've tried everything. No, Liv. You've tried all the obvious things. It's time to get creative. That spark, that tiny flicker of fight reignited in my chest. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. "Start a list," she ordered. "Every single option. Even the dumb ones. I'm coming over in the morning with coffee and bagels. We're fixing this." The call ended, but the electricity lingered. Maybe there was still a way. Maybe the door hadn't slammed shut. Maybe it was just jammed. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, letting Taylor's words play over and over in my mind. This is not how your story ends. At 7:30 sharp the next morning, Taylor knocked on my door like she was on a mission. She burst in with a tray of coffees, a bag of warm bagels, and the kind of determined energy that makes people believe in miracles. "You look like hell," she said, opening my curtains and squinting at me in the light. "Thanks." She handed me coffee exactly the way I like it. "Drink. We need your brain online." I drank. She booted up her laptop and opened a new document titling it Operation Passport Rescue. "Okay. First, have you checked for super emergency passport services, like someone died in another country level of emergency?" I nodded. "They still take 3 to 5 business days, and they need death certificates. This isn't technically an emergency." "Fine. What about moving the interview?" "Impossible, I already tried." "Temporary travel document." I had already Googled it. Only issued to U.S. citizens abroad. Not for travel to. Taylor chewed her lip. "Okay. What about Canada?" I blinked. "What?" She shrugged. "Could you drive to Canada and apply for a passport there?" "We don't live in a spy movie, Taylor. You can't just sneak over the border and get a new identity." She grinned. "Worth asking." The hours passed in a blur of wild ideas and increasingly desperate Google searches. Most of them ended the same way, with a hard no. By noon, I was ready to give up again. But Taylor wasn't. "There's gotta be something we're missing," she said, scrolling through yet another forum thread. Then she stopped. "Wait," she said. "What is this?" I leaned over her shoulder. "Premium passport expediting services. 24-hour turnaround." I rolled my eyes. That sounds like a scam. Not all of them. "Look, this one's legit. BBB accredited. Government partnerships. Tons of reviews." She clicked through testimonials. Story after story of people in emergencies who got new passports in under 48 hours. "How is that even possible?" I asked. "They have relationships with the passport agencies," she explained. "They know the system. They can get you an appointment when none are showing online. They send couriers to wait in person." It still sounded too good to be true. But the more we read, the more legit it looked. Then we hit the catch. The cost nearly $2,000. I slumped back. "I can't afford that." I already maxed out my card on the plane ticket and the interview suit. Taylor was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me with that familiar fire in her eyes. Then we crowdfund. My instinct was immediate. Absolutely not. Why not? Because I'm not telling everyone my sister stole my passport and my parents don't care. You don't have to. Just say it was stolen. Keep it simple. Focus on the goal. It's humiliating. Is it more humiliating than letting her win?
Silence. Taylor leaned in. You've worked too hard for too long to let pride be the thing that stops you. People love you, Olivia. Your professors, your classmates. You've helped so many of them. Let them help you.
I hesitated.
Then I thought about every night I'd stayed up studying, every shift at the coffee shop, every dream I'd let fuel me when the rest of my world said I was asking for too much.
Okay, I whispered. Okay. We drafted the email together. Kept it short. Focused on the opportunity, on the emergency, on the timeline. We left out the messy family stuff. By that afternoon, we had emailed my closest professors, my advisor, and the honors program coordinator. Taylor sent a second wave to the department listserv. Now she said we wait. And for the first time in 2 days, I felt something flicker in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't out of time yet. The first donation came just 2 hours later. I was sitting on the floor nervously refreshing my inbox like it owed me answers when I saw the subject line, Venmo. You've received $200 from Professor Winters. The note read, "This opportunity is too important to miss. Go get that scholarship, Olivia." I covered my mouth with my hand, tears instantly brimming in my eyes. Taylor, sitting next to me with her laptop, looked over and grinned. "Told you," she said. Then came another, and another. Dr. Linton from the Political Science Department sent $150 and added, "We haven't had a Rhodes Scholar in the department for years. You're our best shot."
My inbox was lighting up like a Christmas tree. One by one, professors, classmates, even people I hadn't contacted directly were responding, some with money, some with words of encouragement, and a few with both.
By nightfall, we had raised just over $1,600. Still short of the $2,000 goal, but astonishingly close for a single afternoon.
"We'll get the rest tomorrow," Taylor said confidently.
"I'll send a second round first thing in the morning." I nodded, overwhelmed. Not just by the donations, but by what they meant. These weren't just dollars. They were proof that people believed in me. That I'd built something real, relationships, trust, community, even if my family never saw it.
Around 10, I was finally starting to feel something close to peace when my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Cautiously, I answered. "Olivia." "It's Aunt Catherine, your mother's sister." I froze. Aunt Catherine had been estranged from our family for years, the result of some long-ago falling out that was never fully explained. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year.
"How did you—" "Your friend Taylor found me on Facebook," she said warmly. "Told me what happened. Olivia, I want to help."
I blinked in disbelief. "You do?"
She exhaled, her voice soft but firm. "When I was your age, I had a fellowship offer to study in Japan. Your grandfather intercepted the acceptance letter. Said international travel wasn't appropriate for a young woman. I didn't find out about it until after the deadline had passed." I sat there stunned. The parallel was so exact it felt eerie. I never knew that. I whispered. "The Parker family has a history of clipping wings," she said bitterly. "But that stops with you." She paused, then added, "I'm sending the rest of the money you need. And a little extra. Consider it my way of breaking the cycle."
Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they came from something deeper than sadness. Something like relief. Like validation.
"I don't even know what to say," I whispered. "Say you're getting on that plane," she said. "Say you're going to Oxford. Say you're going to live the life you earned." "I will," I said, "I promise." When I hung up, Taylor was beaming. "You're funded," she said. "We're doing this." I didn't sleep much that night. But the exhaustion felt different, like my body knew rest was coming soon, even if I had one more storm to walk through. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called the passport expediting service. A representative named Marcus answered and confirmed that yes, with their premium service and a same-day in-person submission, they could get me a new passport within 24 hours. "You'll need to be at the Chicago Passport Agency by 11 today," Marcus said.
Bring proof of travel, government ID, your birth certificate, and the signed contract I'm sending now. I'll be there.
Taylor, who'd spent the night on my couch again, jumped into action. Road trip to Chicago. Let's go.
We printed documents, double-checked the requirements, and packed everything in a color-coded folder. I changed the locks on my apartment before leaving just in case, and we hit the road. The car ride was quiet at first. My nerves were on edge. I kept expecting something else to go wrong. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Heard you found a way around your little passport problem. Resourceful. But some things aren't meant to be fought. Mom and Dad are worried about you. I stared at the message, my blood going cold. Taylor, I said, showing her the screen. It's Madison. She read the message, her jaw tightening. She's watching your social media. Probably saw someone's post about the fundraiser. You think she'll try to stop me again? Taylor didn't answer right away. We're not taking chances. First thing tomorrow, we change all your passwords. And tonight I added we don't go back to my place. We drove straight to Chicago and checked into a hotel under Taylor's name. No traceable names, no risks. When we arrived at the passport agency, Marcus was already there, tall suit jacket, clipboard in hand. He looked like someone who solved problems for a living. Olivia, he asked, extending a hand. Glad you made it. You've got everything. I handed over the folder. He scanned the documents, nodded, and smiled. Perfect. Let's get you a passport. He walked us past the massive line straight to a side entrance. As promised, he had contacts on the inside. Within 30 minutes, we had submitted everything. Your case is straightforward, he said. Since it's a replacement and you have proof of urgent travel, we're putting a rush on it. You should have the passport by tomorrow morning. I exhaled for the first time all day. Thank you. He smiled. You're doing the hard part. We just handle logistics. Taylor and I grabbed lunch near the agency and returned to the hotel. I started replying to all the kind messages I'd received. Taylor monitored my inbox. Everything felt cautiously possible again, until I saw him. From our hotel room window, I spotted a figure I'd know anywhere, my dad, standing outside the passport agency, talking to a security guard. My breath caught in my throat. Taylor. He's here. She rushed to the window, saw him, and swore under her breath. How did he even know, she asked. I shook my head. The service only has one Chicago location. Madison must have figured it out and sent him. Taylor's eyes narrowed. Do you think he'll try to stop you? He might try to tell them I'm not authorized, I said. That there's some issue with my application. We need to warn Marcus. I texted him immediately. My father is outside the agency. He may try to interfere. Please be alert. Marcus replied almost instantly. Thanks for the heads up. Stay where you are. I'll handle it. 5 minutes later, Marcus met us at a side exit. Your father tried to claim there was a mistake in your application, he said calmly. Said you weren't authorized to travel. But since you're over 18 and your paperwork's in order, his claims have no legal weight. Security asked him to leave. Relief and rage crashed over me in equal measure. My father, the man who was supposed to protect me, had tried to stop me from getting a passport, from getting my future. Again. We returned to the hotel and locked the door. Taylor changed all my passwords while I packed my interview materials for the next day just in case. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were chaotic, lost suitcases, missing documents. Madison waiting for me in the Oxford interview room, smug as ever. At 8 a.m., Marcus called. I have your passport. Where would you like it delivered? 3 hours later, I held it in my hands, that small blue booklet heavier with meaning than it had ever been before. I've got it, I whispered, eyes filling with tears. I know, Taylor said, grinning. You're going to Oxford. Holding that passport felt like holding proof that I wasn't crazy, that all the struggle, all the resistance had been real. But more importantly, that I had survived it. My flight was in less than 8 hours leaving from Detroit. That gave us just enough time to get back to my apartment, grab my packed suitcase, and head for the airport. But as we pulled into my street, Taylor tapped the brakes and cursed under her breath. What I asked already, dreading the answer. She nodded toward the curb. Madison's car. Parked right outside my building. I didn't even need to ask what she was doing there. She's waiting for you, Taylor said, tightening her grip on the steering wheel. Probably to make a last-minute plea. Or deliver one final threat. Or some twisted combo of both. I wasn't having it. I just need my suitcase, I said. She can yell from the hallway if she wants. I'm not missing this flight. We parked, got out, walked with purpose toward my apartment. I could feel Taylor flanking me like a bodyguard. Madison was sitting cross-legged on the floor by my door, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just nearly destroyed my life.
When she saw me, she stood up slowly. "Well," she said, eyes narrowed. "Guess you figured it out."
"Yes, I did," I replied, not breaking stride. "Now move. I have a plane to catch."
She stepped in front of the door, blocking it. "Mom and Dad are really upset," she said, arms crossed. "Dad even went to Chicago. They think you've changed."
I looked her dead in the eye. "I haven't changed. I've just stopped apologizing for who I am."
"They're worried," she continued, her voice tightening, "that you'll never come back. That this whole Oxford thing is just a way of cutting us off." "It's not," I said, keeping my tone even. "But if I have to choose between staying stuck and moving forward, I'm moving forward."
She stared at me for a moment, then slowly stepped aside.
"Fine, get your stuff."
We walked in. Taylor stood guard near the door while I grabbed my bags. Everything was where I'd left it. Nothing missing. But I checked anyway, just in case. Madison followed me inside.
"Of course. You don't understand what it's like," she said quietly. "Being compared to you all the time. Even now, Mom keeps telling me to take community college classes like you did, but no one cares what I actually want."
I zipped my suitcase. "And that justifies stealing my passport."
She flinched. "I didn't mean to ruin it. I just wanted you to slow down. Maybe think about what you're leaving behind."
I paused, finally turning to face her. For the first time, I saw something beneath the anger, something brittle and terrified. She didn't hate me. She feared losing me.
"I've spent my whole life shrinking myself to make you feel bigger," I said.
"I'm done doing that."
She opened her mouth to argue. I raised a hand to stop her.
"I don't have time for a heart-to-heart. My flight leaves in 4 hours, and I am not missing it."
As Taylor and I walked out, Madison called after me.
"What should I tell Mom and Dad?"
I stopped in the doorway. "Tell them I'll call after the interview. Tell them I hope someday they'll be proud of me for pursuing something bigger." "And Madison?" I met her eyes, unflinching. "I hope someday you'll stop trying to block my path and start building your own."
We left. The drive to the airport was quiet. Not awkward, just heavy. Taylor and I were both processing what had just happened, what it all meant. At the security checkpoint, she pulled me into a hug so tight it stole my breath. "Text me when you land," she said. "And when you get that scholarship, don't act too surprised. You're ready."
I smiled, heart-pounding nerves and adrenaline swirling.
"Thank you," I said, "for everything. I literally couldn't have done this without you." Then I walked through security, passport in hand, head held high.
The magnitude of everything that had happened started to really settle in as I sat at the gate. In just a few hours, I'd be flying thousands of miles away, not just from Lakeville or Madison, but from the version of myself that thought I needed my family's approval to chase my dreams.
This trip wasn't just about Oxford anymore.
It was about reclaiming my voice, my future, my right to exist outside their expectations. On the plane, I finally allowed myself to close my eyes and rest. Not a frantic, twitchy nap like before a real sleep. The kind where your body knows the fight isn't over, but at least one battle's been won.
When I woke up, we were flying over the Atlantic. The sun was rising outside my window, casting soft gold over the clouds below. I pulled out my laptop to review my interview prep, but my brain was still foggy from exhaustion and jet lag. Every question I read turned into a blur of words. Every answer I tried to practice got jumbled. For a terrifying moment, I wondered, what if I'm too tired to do well? What if I've come all this way only to blow it? But then I reminded myself I didn't get here by chance. I got here because I refused to quit. Because I refused to let someone else write the ending of my story. That resolve would carry me the rest of the way. When we landed at Heathrow, I navigated the chaos of baggage claim and customs with a kind of detached calm. Passport secure in my pocket, I caught the train to Oxford, watching the English countryside blur past the window like some kind of dream montage. Oxford was even more beautiful than I imagined. Quietly majestic, spires and cobblestones, mist clinging to rooftops. It didn't look real. It looked like a painting, the kind that whispered, "You belong here." I checked into a modest guest house recommended by a past Rhodes Scholar from my university. The woman at the front desk, a sweet, older Brit named Margaret, took one look at my travel-wrecked face and said, "You'll want some tea and a proper nap before your big day tomorrow." She brought me scones and warned me not to sleep too long or I'd be jet-lagged into oblivion. So I took her advice: short nap, then a walk. Oxford at twilight was hauntingly beautiful. The streets glowed with lamplight. The old colleges loomed with centuries of history. It felt like the kind of place where ideas had weight, where ambition wasn't something to hide, it was something to honor. I ended up in a tiny cafe, prepping with flashcards and coffee. Taylor texted me as I reviewed, landed safely. Nervous.
Yes to both, I replied, but I've got this.
Damn right you do.
Later that evening, I checked my email and found a message from Professor Winters. "Olivia, remember, you've already done the impossible just by getting to that room tomorrow. Let your story speak for you. That's what the committee wants to see." Reading those words reminded me of everyone who had poured themselves into helping me. Every professor, every friend, even Aunt Catherine. I wasn't just here for me anymore.
I was here for us.
That night I tossed and turned, rehearsing answers, imagining worst-case scenarios, wondering if I was going to be asked something I'd never prepared for. At 3:00 a.m., I gave up on sleep, turned on the desk lamp, reviewed my notes for the 20th time. Somehow, somewhere between stress and strategy, I dozed off. The next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. Interview day.
Gray skies outside. November chill in the air.
I dressed in my navy suit, brushed out my hair, and looked in the mirror. Tired eyes. Set jaw. Steel in my spine. I was ready. The examination school's building was massive, all Gothic arches and solemn stone, like stepping into a cathedral of intellect. It felt like the air itself carried the weight of every brilliant mind that had ever passed through. Inside, nervous energy buzzed through the hallway. Dozens of candidates were gathered, all dressed in their finest, holding neatly prepared folders, or reviewing notes on their tablets and phones. I found a quiet corner and tried to focus my breathing, blocking out the quiet murmurs and polite introductions bouncing around the room. Everyone looked polished, confident, accomplished. There was a girl from Princeton who had done climate work in Indonesia, a guy from MIT with a background in computational linguistics, and also apparently a published poet. Another candidate was fluent in 5 languages and had already interned at the United Nations. And then there was me, still running on almost no sleep, still emotionally wrung out from days of family chaos and bureaucratic battles. My hair wasn't falling perfectly into place. My hands were cold. I felt like an imposter. Like any second someone would walk in and say, "Sorry, Olivia Parker, you were never supposed to be here." But instead, a woman holding a clipboard entered the room and called, "Olivia Parker, room 4, please. They're ready for you." My stomach dropped like an elevator, free-falling through the floor. This was it. The moment I'd fought for. I stood up, smoothed my suit, squared my shoulders, and walked. The door to room 4 creaked open, slowly revealing 5 committee members arranged in a semicircle around a single chair. They looked exactly as intimidating as I imagined, dignified, reserved, curious. "Miss Parker," the committee chair said. She was older, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. "Please have a seat." "Thank you," I said, sitting down with deliberate care, trying to hide the fact that my legs were practically vibrating under the table. The panel introduced themselves. 2 Oxford professors, a former Rhodes Scholar now working in international development, a diplomatic officer, and the chair herself, a historian specializing in 20th century geopolitics. "We're going to ask you a series of questions," she explained. "Not just about your academic work, but about your leadership, your values, and your commitment to service." I nodded. "Of course, I'm ready." And with that, the interview began. It started predictably enough: questions about my thesis on emerging democracies, my research methodology, my views on international conflict resolution. I had rehearsed these answers 1,000 times, and my responses came naturally. I could feel myself starting to hit a rhythm. The diplomatic officer leaned forward. "Miss Parker, what's your take on the recent multilateral trade agreement in Southeast Asia? Specifically, how would you balance the economic benefits with the labor concerns raised by several human rights groups?" I jumped in. "I think the trade agreement offers a strong foundation for regional cooperation, but it lacks enforceable labor protections. I'd propose a supplemental agreement, a kind of ethics protocol that includes third-party monitoring and conditional trade incentives based on compliance with fair labor standards. A small nod from the committee chair. Encouraging. Then came the curveball. The former Rhodes Scholar, a man in his 30s with kind eyes but a sharp tone, looked at me and said, "Your application materials mention overcoming personal adversity, especially related to limited family support. Could you speak to how those experiences have shaped your resilience?" The question hit me like a sucker punch. I hesitated for the first time. I could lie. I could gloss it over, keep it neat and professional. Say something vague about economic hardship or being a first-generation college student. But I didn't come this far to be anyone but myself. So I took a breath and told the truth. Just 3 days ago, I began my passport was taken by a family member who believed that this opportunity, the Rhodes, meant I was turning my back on my roots. They tried to stop me from coming. Not out of malice exactly, but out of fear. I looked around the table. No one interrupted. No one looked shocked, just listening. So I did what I've always done, I continued. I found a way. I reached out to my professors, my classmates, even distant relatives. They stepped up, helped me replace the passport in time, funded the emergency services, got me here. I smiled small but sure. What that experience reinforced, I said, is that resilience isn't just grit. It's creativity. It's knowing when to ask for help. It's choosing to keep showing up even when every door seems locked. The room was still. Then the committee chair leaned in slightly. "And how did that shape your view of service?" It reminded me, I said, that access to opportunity is often determined not by talent, but by support systems. If I earn this scholarship, I want to pay forward the kind of belief others had in me when I almost gave up. The former Rhodes Scholar gave a small nod, and for the first time his expression softened. The rest of the interview returned to more familiar territory. We talked about my proposed research on coalition building among post-conflict nations, about my experience mentoring first-gen students, about ethical dilemmas in foreign policy. Then the final question came, and it was a big one. The committee chair looked at me, her voice calm but weighty. "The Rhodes Trust seeks individuals who will, as we say, fight the world's fight. What do you believe is the most urgent fight today?" I didn't pause. I had been preparing for this moment for years. "I believe the greatest challenge facing our generation is the collapse of global trust," I said. "Nationalism is rising. International cooperation is weakening. Problems like climate change, migration, and cybersecurity are global, but we're treating them with isolated national solutions." I leaned forward. "My fight is for a new kind of global citizenship. One that doesn't erase cultural identity, but elevates shared responsibility. One that reminds people that we are stronger together, not apart." I finished. The silence that followed didn't feel tense. It felt full. The chair finally stood. "Thank you, Miss Parker. We'll notify you of our decision within 2 weeks." I stood as well. "Thank you for the opportunity." As I walked out of the building into the gray Oxford afternoon, something strange happened. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel scared. I felt complete. Not because I knew I'd won, but because I had shown them exactly who I was. Unfiltered, unpolished, and completely determined. Whatever happened next, I had done the impossible. I had made it to that room, and I had not flinched. I walked through the cobbled streets of Oxford like I was floating. Not because I was confident I'd won, honestly, the other candidates were insanely impressive, but because I'd survived the storm. Everything from the passport nightmare to the emotional minefield of confronting my family had led to this moment. And I hadn't crumbled. The pressure that had been gripping my chest for days slowly started to dissolve. My body still felt like it had been hit by a truck, but emotionally I was lighter than I'd been in weeks. That evening I wandered the city alone. I let myself get lost on purpose, slipping through quiet alleyways and ancient courtyards, pretending just for a moment that I was already a student here. Already part of this legacy of thinkers and leaders and stubborn idealists. I stopped by a bookstore, browsed shelves filled with titles I could barely afford on a student budget, and finally bought a cheap journal with a soft blue cover. It matched my passport. Seemed symbolic. Back at the guest house, I wrote in it for hours. Everything I hadn't said out loud during the interview. Everything I was still carrying.
At some point, my phone buzzed with a message from Taylor.
Tell me everything. Did you slay or what?
I laughed and texted back I slayed. No clue if I got it. But I was real. And I didn't hold anything back.
That's the win right there. So proud of you.
Then came a message from Professor Winters.
You've already accomplished more just by making it to that interview than most students will in a lifetime. The committee saw the real Olivia. That's all you could have hoped for.
I reread that message 3 times. He was right.
Whether or not I got the scholarship, I had earned the right to be in that room. And I'd shown up fully, not the version of me my parents wanted, not the edited version that smiled through pain, the real me.
The next morning, I caught a train back to London and boarded the long flight home. I slept most of the way, real sleep this time, not stress-fueled survival naps, but deep, peaceful rest.
Back in Detroit, Taylor was waiting for me at the arrivals area, holding a cardboard sign that said, "Welcome home. Rhodes Legend."
I laughed so hard I almost dropped my suitcase.
We hugged tight right there in the middle of the airport like a scene from a cheesy, feel-good movie.
Tell me every detail, she said as we walked toward the parking lot. What did they ask? How did you answer? Did anyone faint from your brilliance? I told her everything during the ride back to Ann Arbor, the tricky questions, the passport story moment, the final speech about global trust. She kept nodding, eyes wide. They'd be insane not to give it to you, she said. But even if they don't, that room saw you. And the fact that you made it there is a freaking novel in itself. When we got to my apartment, it felt surreal to be back. The new locks were still intact. The drawer that had once held my passport now held my emergency backup documents, a kind of shrine to everything that had gone wrong and how I'd clawed my way through it. 2 days passed, then 3, then a week. No news. I distracted myself with finals papers and late-night fries with Taylor. Madison sent a couple of texts, vague non-apology, hope it went well type stuff. I ignored them. My parents left a voicemail asking if I'd be coming home for Thanksgiving. No mention of Oxford. No mention of the passport. Just business as usual. I couldn't do it, not yet. I needed time. By the second week, the waiting started to get unbearable. Every buzz of my phone made my heart leap. Every email notification set off a mini panic. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I got the email. Subject: Rhodes Scholarship Decision. I sat frozen in the library, cursor hovering over the message. My hands shook. My vision blurred. I felt like I might throw up, cry, scream, or all 3. Then I clicked. Dear Ms. Parker, we are pleased to inform you. That was as far as I got before I dropped my phone and burst into tears. I'd done it. I was a Rhodes Scholar. After everything. The betrayal. The fight. The doubt. The debt. The detours. I had made it. People turned to stare as I cried at my library desk, but I didn't care. A girl across from me leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay?" I wiped my face and laughed. I just got the Rhodes. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God, are you serious? And just like that, the word started to spread. Someone clapped. Another person pulled out their phone and Googled my name. Within minutes, I was surrounded by people congratulating me, strangers who suddenly weren't strangers at all. People who understood what this meant. I texted Taylor with shaking fingers. I got it. Her reply, OMFG. I'm screaming. Where are you? I'm coming now. 10 minutes later, she crashed through the library doors, grabbed me, and spun me in a circle like we were in a rom-com. Everyone clapped again. It was chaos. Beautiful, validating chaos. That night, Taylor threw a small party at her apartment. Just a few friends, some professors, and way too much champagne. I told the story, all of it from Madison's Sabotage to the Chicago passport rescue, and everyone laughed and gasped and asked what kind of villain origin story my sister was working with. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Because this moment, this room, these people, this was my family. When Professor Winters raised his glass and said to Olivia for proving that perseverance can be louder than privilege, I felt a lump rise in my throat. He saw me. They all saw me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to make room for anyone else. I was exactly where I belonged. 2 days after the party, I got a call from the university's media relations office. Word had spread fast. Rhodes scholarships always made headlines, especially when awarded to students from public universities.
They wanted to feature me on the school website, organize a press release, and set up an interview with the local TV station. I should have been nervous. Maybe a part of me was. But mostly I felt ready. The interview took place in a small local news studio that was colder than I expected and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. The anchor was warm and curious, and the questions focused on my academic journey, my research interests, and what I hoped to do after Oxford. No mention of stolen passports, no need to relive the drama. The world was finally seeing the part of my story that had nothing to do with sabotage and everything to do with perseverance. Toward the end, the anchor asked, "What advice would you give to other students who want to pursue big dreams, especially international ones?" I looked straight into the camera and answered with no script, no hesitation. Believe in your potential enough to fight for it. Surround yourself with people who nurture your growth instead of fearing it. And know that sometimes determination matters more than talent or privilege. Your story is worth writing, no matter who tries to erase it. The interview aired the next morning, and predictably my phone blew up. I got messages from classmates, professors, and even kids I'd mentored back in undergrad. Everyone wanted to say congrats, but then my family entered the chat. First, my dad called. His voice was subdued, hesitant. "We saw your segment on the news," he said. "That scholarship? It's a big deal." "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It is." There was a pause. "Well, we're proud of you, Olivia." It was the first time I'd ever heard those words from him. And yet, they felt hollow. Like someone reading a line they didn't quite believe. "Thanks," I said simply. Not cold, but not warm either. Next came Madison. A text. "Saw you on TV. Guess you showed us all." That was it. No apology, no ownership, just a cryptic, passive-aggressive nod to the fact that I'd done the thing she tried to stop me from doing. I didn't respond, because I knew where that road led back into a cycle of guilt competition and apology. Then my mom called. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Sweetheart," she said, "we never meant to stand in your way. We were just worried. Oxford is so far, and you've always been so driven. We thought maybe you were pushing too hard." A mother worries, you know. I wanted to scream, to tell her how her worry had nearly cost me everything. But instead I spoke plainly. "You defended Madison after she stole my passport," I said. "Dad tried to stop me from getting a replacement. That wasn't concern. That was sabotage." Her voice cracked. "We made mistakes." "You did," I said. "And I need time. I'm not saying we'll never speak again, but I can't pretend like everything's okay just because I succeeded anyway." She was quiet. "Then, we love you." "I know," I said, "but sometimes love isn't enough. You have to support the person you love, too." That was the last time I spoke to my parents for several weeks. In the time that followed, I focused on preparing for the move to Oxford. Finalizing my visa, organizing my travel documents this time, double-locked in a fireproof safe, and sorting out housing. I got matched with 2 other Rhodes Scholars, one from Kenya, the other from New Zealand, and we arranged to share a flat just a few blocks from the university. It felt good, clean, like a fresh start. Taylor's parents offered to store my stuff over the summer, and I spent my last weeks in the States staying with them. They celebrated me the way I'd always imagined a family should. No resentment, no manipulation, just pride and joy. Taylor helped me pack. We laughed over my over-planning and cried when we hugged at the airport. "You're not just going to Oxford," she said. "You're going to show the world exactly what resilience looks like." Aunt Catherine sent me off with a care package full of American snacks and a handwritten letter that I read 3 times before even boarding the plane. She ended it with, "You are the one who broke the pattern, Olivia. Fly free." I did. The plane to England felt different this time. It wasn't an escape. It was a launch. Oxford welcomed me with cool autumn air, ancient buildings, and a hum of ambition that felt electric. My flatmates were brilliant, warm, and deeply curious, the kind of people who asked big questions over breakfast and debated ethics over dinner. I found myself walking through the city every evening just to remind myself that it was all real, that I had made it. Classes were intense as expected. The bar was higher than anything I'd ever experienced. But so was my confidence. I wasn't the smartest person in every room anymore. but I no longer needed to be. I was finally among peers. Equals.
And still, I carried every part of the journey with me. I kept that soft blue journal close, filling it with thoughts, plans, reminders. I stayed in touch with Professor Winters, emailing updates about my classes and research. I Zoomed with Taylor every Sunday. Aunt Catherine sent care packages every few weeks, always with a new quote tucked inside. My family back home remained complicated. Madison eventually sent a longer message, part apology, part explanation. Something about pressure, about never feeling good enough. It didn't excuse what she did, but it was the closest she'd ever come to owning it. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, just self-preservation. My parents called a few times, left voicemails, asked about my classes, offered to visit. I kept the boundaries intact. Because here's what I had finally learned. Family doesn't get to define your worth. They don't get to set the limit on your dreams. And they don't get to keep you small just because they're afraid of who you're becoming. Family, I realized, isn't just blood. It's whoever shows up when you're drowning and helps you swim. By the end of my first term at Oxford, something in me had quietly but permanently shifted. I was no longer operating from a place of desperation or hunger to prove myself to anyone. Not to Madison, not to my parents, not even to the scholarship committee. I was finally moving from a place of curiosity, of calm power. The kind that doesn't yell to be heard, but changes the room by showing up. Our apartment, a sun-drenched space above a quiet cafe, had become its own tiny world. My flatmates Zuri and Eli became family in every way that mattered. We cooked together, shared late-night rants about politics, and edited each other's essays with brutal honesty and warm encouragement. They had their own stories too. Zuri had grown up in Nairobi, navigated civil unrest during high school, and still managed to become one of Kenya's top youth climate advocates. Eli was from rural New Zealand, a self-described introvert who'd spent a year teaching refugee children in Greece before applying to the Rhodes. We were different in background, culture, worldview, but deeply aligned in our hunger to understand and fix the world one piece at a time. In a weird way, their presence helped me process my own past. Not through long talks or therapy-style unpacking, but by showing me what real generous support looked like. How it felt to live with people who didn't resent your ambition, but celebrated it. Who didn't compete with your wins, but added their own. That winter, while prepping a joint presentation on post-conflict governance, I had a moment. Zuri had just given a brilliant breakdown of grassroots peace-building efforts in the Sahel. Eli had added a visual timeline I hadn't even thought to include, and I had drawn connections between international policy and local implementation with a clarity I didn't know I possessed. We finished. The professor smiled. The room clapped, and I sat back in my chair, quietly stunned. We were good, all of us. Not in a flashy, overachieving way. Just sharp, awake, alive. I wasn't out of place. I was in exactly the right place. And finally, I let that truth sink in. Still, there were days when the past tugged at me, usually through a notification on my phone. Madison's texts became sporadically sincere. Messages like, "Hope school's going okay. I'm trying to get my GED." Or, "Saw a documentary on Oxford the other day. Thought of you. Guess I was wrong to try and stop you." Some of them stung. Others just left me tired. I never knew what version of her I was getting, and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to keep guessing. Eventually, I responded to one. A simple message. "I hope you're doing better. I'm focusing on my work here. Please don't contact me unless it's about something important." She didn't reply. And strangely, that silence felt like peace. My parents kept things just as vague. Holiday emails with no mention of the scholarship. No direct questions about my life. Just updates about people I hadn't thought about since high school, and passive comments like "the family's asking about you." I didn't cut them off. But I didn't lean in either. It wasn't anger anymore. It was boundaries. And the freedom that comes with knowing you're allowed to draw them. Instead, I leaned into the new. I joined a working group on digital ethics and international law. I submitted an article to a global affairs journal, and it got published. I started mentoring other first-gen international students,
helping them navigate life far from home. And slowly I began to realize my story wasn't just a cautionary tale about betrayal. It was a blueprint for resilience. The following spring, the Rhodes Trust asked if I'd be willing to speak at a panel for incoming applicants. A Q&A with scholars who had overcome significant obstacles. I hesitated. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to share that part of me again. The mess, the heartbreak, the months of panic and fight and pain. But then I remembered being that student, on the verge of giving up, believing the system wasn't built for people like me. I remembered how much I had needed to see someone say, "Yeah, it's brutal, but you can get through it." So I said yes. The panel was held in a modest hall on campus, live-streamed for international candidates. I spoke second. The woman before me talked about surviving civil war in Syria. The man after me spoke about growing up in foster care and aging out of the system at 16. When it was my turn, I stood behind the podium and told the truth. I almost didn't make it to my Rhodes interview. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because someone close to me tried to stop me from going. They took my passport, told me I was abandoning my family, that I was chasing a fantasy. I paused. The room went still. What they didn't understand, I said, was that this wasn't about running away. It was about running towards something. Something bigger than fear. Something bigger than guilt or small-town shame or the weight of someone else's expectations. I told them how I got the passport replaced, how Taylor helped me raise the money, how strangers, professors, classmates, even a long-lost aunt showed up when my family didn't. And I told them how in that interview room I realized that my story wasn't a liability. It was my superpower. That night, my inbox filled with messages from applicants all over the world. Thank you. I needed to hear that. You reminded me why I'm doing this. I responded to every single one. Because that's what community looks like. That summer, just before flying home for a visit, I sat on a quiet bench overlooking the river Isis and thought about legacy. Not the kind carved into buildings or chiseled into plaques, but the kind we leave behind in the people we lift. My journey to Oxford had taught me the difference between people who love you and people who see you. It taught me that blood doesn't guarantee belief. That not everyone is meant to go where you're going, and that's okay. That dreaming big will always threaten people who've never dared to. And most importantly, it taught me that resilience isn't silent suffering. It's noisy, messy, relentless hope. The day I returned to Michigan for summer break, the air was thick with that heavy, sticky warmth I'd always associated with home thunderstorms brewing somewhere in the distance. Crickets starting their nightly chorus, the kind of dusk that turns the whole sky gold before it collapses into gray. Taylor picked me up from the airport as she always did. We hugged like it hadn't been 8 months, but maybe 8 lifetimes. "You look like someone who's been eating crumpets with geniuses and fighting for democracy in a blazer," she said, tossing my suitcase into the trunk. "You're not entirely wrong," I laughed. "I brought you chocolate from the airport, so you have to keep being nice." Back in Ann Arbor, we fell back into our old rhythm. Late-night snacks walks down empty streets, dumb inside jokes that no one else would understand. It was the only kind of familiarity I welcomed anymore. Easy, uncomplicated, real. But within a few days, reality tapped on my shoulder. A voicemail from my dad. A text from my mom. Another message from Madison, this one unusually direct. "We'd like to have dinner. No drama, just talk." Taylor raised an eyebrow when I told her. "Are you going?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me doesn't want to give them the chance to rewrite history. But another part kind of wants to hear what they'll say. She nodded. "Do it on your terms. You don't owe them a performance." So I agreed. A neutral location. A diner halfway between their house and Taylor's apartment. No home court advantage. When I walked in, they were already seated in a booth. My mom smiled a little too brightly. My dad looked awkward, unsure of whether to hug me or salute me. Madison sat at the end, her face unreadable. "Hi," I said, sliding into the seat. "Hi, sweetheart," my mom said. "You look amazing." I nodded. "Thanks." There was a moment of silence, the clink of forks, a cough from a nearby booth. Then Madison cleared her throat. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "For taking your passport. For everything, really. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I know it was messed up. I think I just didn't want to be the sister who stayed behind while you went off and became someone." It wasn't a perfect apology.
but it was more than I'd expected.
And I know it's not your fault. I felt like that, she added, eyes fixed on the napkin in front of her. You worked hard. You earned everything.
I studied her face. It looked different. Not just older, more worn. Less defiant. Maybe even honest. My mom reached for my hand. We didn't handle things well either. We thought we were protecting you, but we were really just scared. Scared you'd leave and never look back. I didn't leave because I didn't love you, I said quietly. I left because I couldn't grow in a place where I was expected to stay small. My dad finally spoke. We're proud of you, Olivia. I know we didn't say it right or soon enough, but we are. I didn't know how to respond to that. Not with a neat bow or a movie script moment of forgiveness. But I nodded. That was enough. The rest of dinner was civil. We talked about Oxford. I kept it surface level. No big emotional confessions. Just stories about classes, my flatmates, the city. They listened. At the end of the night, we hugged goodbye. Madison whispered, I really am trying. I whispered back, try harder. But thank you. Back at Taylor's, I collapsed on the couch. Well, she asked, passing me a bowl of popcorn. I didn't throw mashed potatoes at anyone, so I'm calling it a win. Progress. We watched bad reality TV until we both fell asleep. I woke up around 2 a.m., still on the couch, heart weirdly light.
And that's when I knew healing wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just the absence of dread. That summer I started writing a book. Not about roads, not about Oxford, about all the things that had almost stopped me from getting there. About sabotage, resilience, found family, determination. I didn't know if I'd finish it, but it felt right to start. The second year of my program brought new challenges. Bigger research projects, a competitive internship in Brussels, long nights, tough critiques, public speaking nerves that never quite went away. But through it all, I carried the same quiet fire that had gotten me to Oxford in the first place. The one that said, even if the world doubts you, even if the people closest to you try to hold you back, you keep going. Because that's what dreamers do.
We go anyway. We write the story no one else can write. We live the life no one thought we deserved. And we become the person they never saw coming.
So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like you don't belong, like your dreams are too big, or your voice is too loud, or your path is too messy, I want you to hear me. You are not too much.
You are just enough to change everything.
Drop a comment and tell me what dream you're chasing right now, even if it scares you. Hit like if you've ever had to fight for something no one else believed in. Subscribe for more stories about real resilience, real courage, and real people choosing to show up anyway. And remember, your journey matters. Your story matters.
And no one gets to steal your future.